Good morning. I'm so excited to be here in Racine today. I really love the view of the lake. And I am from Detroit. I'm from Michigan. We have a river view in Detroit. We don't have a lake view, so I feel blessed to be amongst you all here. So I'm also happy to be here amongst colleagues who are really vested in this work. I want to thank you, Karen, for the gracious introduction. Thank you, Essie, for having me here, and Carrie for working so hard, you all for putting this together. So I just want to say that it's good to be amongst colleagues who have a similar interest in health and well-being of community and of families. And we know that the health and well-being of the community is directly related to the health and well-being of mothers and babies in that community. So I'm grateful again to be here to share with you work that I've been doing for the past 11 years and from a Midwest city as well. And so the beauty of this work for so long and doing it so long and so broadly is that the number of lessons you learn, many times you bump your heads, the challenges you have, the successes and the opportunities. So one of the most important things that I can tell you about doing breastfeeding work or doing work with families is that it must be done collaboratively. And so that's why I'm happy to be here with the collaborative, because you all embrace the importance of that. We know that this is not an individual work. There's no one person or one way to solve the problem to improve infant mortality and breastfeeding. And so with that said, I want to focus the mental energy in the room so we can continue to move beyond an aggregate of individuals and to become a community in the room. So I'm going to say a statement. You guys have just had some breakfast. I'm going to say a statement. I need you to get up for a little while. I know we've introduced ourselves, but this is a little different because we're going to see who we are in relationship to others in the room. So if I say something that's true for you, I want you to stand up and say, "That's me." But I want you to go beyond saying "that's me," and I want you to look around and see who you are in relationship to others in the room. Who else is standing with you? Who else is you? Who else are you? So I'm going to ask a few questions. Give me a minute to pull my presentation up. Okay, so we'll start with an easy one. So remember, when I say a statement, you stand up if it's true and you say, "That's me," but you also look around the room, okay? So I am a parent. That's me. Look around. Lots of parents in the room. Lots of parents in the room. Sit back down. I am a grandparent. That's me. All right, great. See, I am originally from Wisconsin. All right, great. I traveled from a different city to be here today. That's me. I am typically awake before 6 a.m. All right, sit down. Yeah, I was on the border too. Like sometimes yeah, sometimes no. So I am typically awake after midnight. Okay, if you stood up for the last two, wait, so who stood up both times? You're up before 6 a.m. and up after midnight? Okay, there's coffee in the back. I am a lactation consultant. Look around, great. I am a social worker. All right, great. I am a nurse or a nurse student or a student nurse. All right, you got to claim it. You got to claim it. I work in public health. That's me. I work in advocacy. That's me. I work in communications. That's me. All right, great. I am a community health worker. That's me. All right, okay. I'm a breastfeeding peer counselor. All right, great. I am an administrator. That's me. I began doing this work less than 5 years ago. All right. I began doing this work more than 15 years ago. All right. I support breastfeeding mothers. That's me. All right, give yourselves a pat on the back and look around and nod if you learn. Just give me a nod if you learned something new about someone here or someone at your table that you didn't know about. All right, great. So now that we've identified who we are in relationship to others here, we can continue to build towards making a breastfeeding friendly Racine collaboratively. In addition to that, in addition to building towards making in addition to understanding the importance of collaboration, you must also recognize and accept that the limited number of Black breastfeeding mothers is a systems issue. It's not an individual issue. Throughout my presentation today, we will be looking at ways to improve the system to better support mothers. Any emphasis placed on the mother should be centered around education, support, and encouragement. No victim blaming. Instead, fix the system that impacts the mother's perceived option to decide to breastfeed. Now that I've noticed that I said perceived option to breastfeed. So today is about looking at ways, barriers, systems approaches, things that impacts the breastfeeding relationship that a mother has, things that impact what we sometimes say a mother's choice, or what I say is a perceived choice for someone to decide to breastfeed. It's so much more involved than just, do you want to breastfeed, yes or no? So we're going to talk about these things. But first of all, what's the big deal? So the big deal about breastfeeding is that babies win. Babies win because breast milk reduces chances of sudden infant death syndrome. Babies win because breast milk is really critically important for premature babies. And if we're talking about infant mortality, we understand that the high rates of infant mortality for babies, and particularly for Black babies, is because of premature birth. And so if we want those babies to succeed and to be successful and healthy and thrive, then breast milk is critically important for those babies. Breast milk is rich in nutrients and antibodies. It enhances brain development, it fights disease and infection, and it's easy for babies to digest. So what's the big deal? The big deal is not only do babies win, families thrive. Families thrive because breast milk is convenient. It satisfies the baby right away. It keeps the family secure. It keeps the family warm and close and comforted. It helps mommy with postpartum weight and postpartum health overall. And it keeps mommy healthy too. And guess what? The price is right. The price is free. Do we have anyone from WIC in here? Okay, so we got a few people from WIC. And I said that the price is free because it's important that we know that even when mothers receive their WIC package, that's a supplemental package if they're receiving infant formula. And so there is still a need for purchase of infant formula. So sometimes people say, hey, well, I get WIC. Well, that's not the full amount of milk that you would need if you're feeding your baby. So money does matter. So also, it's a big deal because communities are vibrant when mothers breastfeed. If you look at this picture here, that's a picture. My organization, Black Mothers Breastfeeding Association, we were celebrating Black Breastfeeding Week this past August. And we're at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History in Detroit. And we do a nationally coordinated baby lift where everybody throughout the country comes together in their local communities, and they hold up their babies in unison. And so this is a picture of that. But communities thrive because breast milk saves lives, making communities vibrant, making them thrive. There's fewer absences from school, from work, from childcare because babies are healthier. And it reduces healthcare costs. And additionally, it's environmentally safe. So again, we're looking at several elements involved in creating a breastfeeding-friendly Racine. The most important element in building the system is community. So how do you involve your target community in your plans and decisions about leadership? This is a billboard here that was in Detroit, and it was posted in several neighborhoods. And you can see on the billboard, those are some of, I can't say Black Mothers Breastfeeding Association because it's too long, so I say BMFA. That's what we call it for short. This is a billboard with BMFA's mothers and babies, as well as our city councilmen, who all worked together and led this initiative to have billboards put up around the city. But they weren't the billboards that you necessarily see on the freeways. These were the smaller ones that you see in the communities and in the neighborhoods as you're kind of driving down those streets. Those streets that residents usually are the only ones that drive down, the people who are really intimately familiar and know that community. And so the billboards were placed throughout a few neighborhoods in Detroit, and it highlights what's important to that community and the mothers of that community. And so there you have it. Those are our babies. We call them BMFA babies. We got a lot of babies. So in order to impact folks, you have to hear them. Their voices must be amplified, resounding, and vibrant every step of the way. There are so many ways to include the voice of the community into repairing the system. Listed here are some examples, including hosting listening sessions, facilitating focus groups, where you're intentional about gaining information to dig deeper into the experiences and rationales for the decisions made, create and distribute surveys, gather narratives and tell stories. We're an oral people. Black people, we're an oral people. We like to talk about our experiences. So this is really important if you're trying to gather information. Host stakeholders meetings where the voice of the community is really entrenched into the fine details of the agenda. So who in your department or organization is responsible for media requests? So if Racine, as I just heard, was one of the, had the highest infant mortality rate, sometimes people want to write a story about that. Who are they talking to? Whose voice is being amplified? So this is an article that ran during Black Breastfeeding Week in 2019. So when they called for a media request and they wanted information, instead of me taking the request, I passed it on to our families so that they could tell their story to the journalists, because those are the voices that we really need to hear. And so what better way to share the voice of the community? This is a recent stakeholders meeting that we had with BMFA, and during the meeting, we reported out to our stakeholders, transparency and honesty are your two good friends. Write that down. Transparency and honesty are your two good friends. When you're both transparent and honest, you build trust and credibility. Because let's face it, people know when you're being dishonest or not forthcoming with them. So we're upfront with our people. We're upfront with our families. It's a partnership. We view it as a partnership, and we approach it in that way. As such, during the stakeholders meeting, we solicited more from them. We wanted to know what else they wanted us to report and share to move forward. And this is important for assuring that our values, because we are a community-based organization, but that our values remain aligned with the families that we work together in partnership with. So it's really, really key. And so just because you think you know what people want to hear doesn't mean you're right. If you want to be right, simply ask them what they would like to know about your work, your programs, your processes, and your outcomes. They'll tell you. Just pull them in a room and let them know. But they're only going to tell you if they trust you, if they trust that you're going to report back to them. So often people are bringing black folks together and picking their brains and getting information, but then don't report back to them. That's when you're not trusted, and that's when you bring them together and they ain't going to talk to you. Because why would I tell you? Because you're not reporting back to me. You're not holding up your end of the bargain. So this was, again, the same stakeholders meeting. And then from left to right, you see on the very left is our host, Oprah Winfrey. That's what we call Destiny affectionately during the meeting. She had such a good time hosting the event. But next to her is Damona. She's one of our community-based doulas. And beside her is one of her mothers, Cherry, who is with child. And then again in the purple shirt is our other community-based doula, Robina, with one of her mothers and with one of their babies. They discussed their experiences in the program, in the community-based doula program, and very candidly, they shared these things with other stakeholders. And there you have it again, the voice of the community unfiltered. So there was no script. No one told them what to say. We just told them to share their experiences. Because we don't only want to highlight the great things, we want to know what are some of the challenges. How can you improve if you don't hear from the folks who you're in partnership with to do work from? You need to know what their stories are in order to best service and serve them. So, who are your leaders in the community? Like, who is respected? Who is looked to for support and advice? Who wants to do more but may need to be invited? Who may you be intentionally keeping away from the table or pushing them off as if what they have to offer is not important? Any black mother who's had a lived experience is an expert in her experience. Any black mother who's had a lived experience is an expert in her experience. No one knows her story better than she does, right? So she's the one who can tell her story. She's the one who can talk about what she needs. So no one can be an expert in Kiddada. I'm the expert in Kiddada, right? So we have to make sure that we don't think we're the expert in other people's lives. So, how do you use the leadership in the community to help you set and reach goals? The leaders are those people who understand the struggles of black mothers and babies from their own lived experience, as well as experiences from others who share a similar socio-cultural background. Lived experience and experiential knowledge are key factors in creating a breastfeeding-friendly system. You cannot create a system without talking to the folks you cannot create a friendly system without talking to the folks who have lived that experience. It's impossible. It will not work. It'll crash and burn. You're wasting your time. So picture here are two of our mommy ambassadors, Malika and Victoria. And Malika and Victoria, they lead the vision for the Mommy Ambassador program with Black Mothers Breastfeeding Association. The BEMFA Mommy Ambassadors are the group of mommies who publicly represent BEMFA. Their voices are amplified to influence and shape institutional, local, state, and national policies and practices. Community integration. Who do you think of as part of your healthcare team? We have to expand who we think of when we think of healthcare teams. Community health workers, community breastfeeding peer counselors, community-based doulas are invaluable partners whose full contributions are made most evident when they are valued with compensation, support, and supervision. compensation, support, and supervision. Stop trying to get black folks to do your work for free. We deserve compensation. It's very important. Value our time. You have to value our time and provide if you want it to be successful, provide the proper supervision and provide the proper support. There has to be staff in place to fill the void or the gaps once a mother leaves the hospital. So the time when mothers are in the home environment are really critical to her success for breastfeeding. Because you're in the hospital, what, 2 days? You know, if there's complications, more. If you have a C-section, more. So home visiting breastfeeding peer counselors, home visiting doulas, community health workers, clubs like our Black Mothers Breastfeeding Club in Detroit and in Shreveport, Louisiana, are built of these folks who are intimately connected to the community. Because these are the folks who live, who work, who worship, who play, and who go to school in these areas. These are the people who can fill those gaps. Go beyond the doors of the hospital. People have to be healthy in their home with their loved ones. So these community integrations into public health and healthcare practices are ways to make true impact. Pictured at the top here is one of our doula mommies on the left with her baby, and then that's one of our former community-based doulas, Olivia, on the right, sitting beside her, and below are our partners. Let me see if I can zoom. Below are our partners at one of our local hospitals, Henry Ford Health System, Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, with their administrative lead, Dr. Wisdom, who's actually nationally renowned, and their patients who are celebrating the life of a healthy newborn baby. To change systems, we have to change policies, which means that we have to engage both government and business leaders to influence this policy. This level of cross-sector engagement and collaboration is really critical to creating a breastfeeding-friendly Racine. And so I'm about to share with you 2 examples of ways that policymakers have been engaged in Detroit and Michigan. So in August 2018, the governor declared August as Breastfeeding Awareness Month in Michigan, right? So we know that August is National Breastfeeding Month. The first week of August is World Breastfeeding Week. And the last week of August is Black Breastfeeding Week, right? So the governor wanted to make it clear that Michigan is celebrating and recognizing the month of August as Breastfeeding Awareness Month in Michigan. So this proclamation or declaration states that the supporters of this effort include hospitals, WIC agencies, community stakeholders, coalitions, physicians, and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, with the goal of increasing initiation and duration rates for healthier babies and closer families. As part of the proclamation, the governor stated that Michigan is committed to reducing infant mortality and increasing the health of mothers and babies. The declaration really speaks to the values of not just the state of Michigan, but to the supporters who made it happen. I can guarantee you that our governor was not sitting, he didn't wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to declare August as Breastfeeding Awareness Month in Michigan. No, he had to be urged to do that. He had to know that his constituents valued that's something that they wanted. So they're put in place, our government officials are put in place by us, and we need to hold them accountable to uphold our values. So here is a way that the voices were used collaboratively it was a collaborative force to make sure that the policymakers understand the values of the people involved in that particular collaborative. So in Detroit, the mayor wrote a proclamation to recognize and celebrate Black Breastfeeding Week. He dedicated the last week of August as Black Breastfeeding Week for the city of Detroit. Now, Black Breastfeeding Week was started in 2013 with some of my esteemed colleagues, Kimberly Seals Allers, Anaya Shangadele Ayoka, and myself. So we decided we needed to celebrate Black Breastfeeding Week and be very intentional about it and uplifting the experience of Black breastfeeding moms. So no, we didn't go to anybody and say, is it okay for us to start Black Breastfeeding Week? We said it's Black Breastfeeding Week this last week of August, and we told people, and so then they jumped on board. Stop thinking you gotta ask folks for permission. We didn't ask anybody. We talked amongst ourselves, and then we just put it out there and did it. And so from that, this was the first time that a city had decided that they too were going to recognize it and celebrate it. And this effort was in response to the urging of advocates and the city council members of the city of Detroit. You saw the one city councilman on the billboard with our moms. So this really is a big deal, and you want to know why, because not only does it show that the city of Detroit values Black families, but by this coming from the mayor, it kind of gives permission to others to recognize and uplift the importance of Black breastfeeding experience. And so those folks who would otherwise not be willing to take a stance on concerns about Black families because, I don't know, maybe they've ignored the infant mortality rate, maybe they think that all things should be equal and not necessarily equitable. But for these people who would otherwise may not make a statement, that now they can say, well, you know what, the mayor said we're celebrating Black Breastfeeding Week, so you have something to back up your decision. So it's very important that we get our leaders involved in this, because now if you wanted to do this at your organization and you didn't have any rationale, maybe you just don't know how to make a case for it. You know it needs to happen, because that happens sometimes. You know something is important, you value it, but you don't know how to make a case for it. Well, now the mayor said it's okay. So if our government leader is recognizing and celebrating this, then here in our small agency, we can too. But be clear, this was in response to civic engagement. The mayor didn't just say, hey, let's celebrate Black Breastfeeding Week. Our organizers or our families have been working with their local city councilman who was supporting the work, and then the city councilman said, hey, we want to do this, and took it to the mayor. The voice of the community matters most. So between 2014 and 2016, I worked with, again, my esteemed colleague, Kimberly Seals Allers, on a project she actually birthed and led, called the First Food Friendly Community Initiative. This was piloted in neighborhoods of Detroit and Philadelphia, using a community partner model to transform the communities into spaces that are welcoming and friendly to breastfeeding mothers. So it was driven by community members, and the very first step in the process, the very first step in the process was really to engage the community. It's really to get the voice of the community involved. And so we walked door to door. We posted ourselves at highly frequented neighborhood business, such as grocery stores. We surveyed, we asked communities about their needs and desires for their families. We were able to assess the needs, the available resources, and the sentiments while identifying gaps in the community based on things that they said they wanted, things that they said they need, and the resources that were actually available to them. Step two in the 3FCI, the First Food Friendly and Community Initiative, is where I played where my role came in. It's where I wrote an adaptable curriculum to really address those needs. So taking the information that we gathered from the voice of the community, the surveys, the interviews, and things that we had done, and creating a curriculum. The curriculum boasts 7 modules about community touch points such as indoor and outdoor recreation, restaurants, daycare centers, churches. So community members were trained with this curriculum using the framework that is inclusive of their lived experience in their own neighborhoods. Remember I talked about how those billboards were on streets that only folks who live there are going to drive down? Because you know how to get in and out, you know your neighborhood better than anybody, right? So step 3 involved a short-term paid internship for those mothers who were involved, because remember, you got to compensate folks for their time. So it was a short-term paid internship where we really also partner with local workforce development agencies, because it has to be a collaborative approach. Right? We need some folks we need communication folks in this room. We need some workforce development folks in this room. If we're talking about building, filling those voids and getting community breastfeeding peer counselors and more doulas and things of that sort. So we involved a local workforce, someone who had expertise in workforce development to really support the interns around implementing the curriculum. And so they went to local businesses to influence the policies as it relates to supporting breastfeeding mothers, because those are the folks who frequent the businesses, right? They know where to go. They know what environments are not supportive of mothers and what environments need to be supportive of mothers. And step 4 of these pilot initiatives is recognition and rewards for those businesses who supported the initiative by changing policies to support breastfeeding mothers. See, sometimes it's not as hard as you think. Sometimes people are just oblivious, right? And so you can go into a business and ask them a question. I mean, it's better if you have your stuff lined up like we did, but be specific, be targeted, know what you're asking for, and sometimes they'll just say yes. Right? So it's not always as hard as you think. So in the Osborne neighborhood of Detroit, interns visited a total of 46 businesses. 25 agreed to support the 3FCI by signing a letter of support. 20 displayed the decals in their businesses. 5 designated spaces within those facilities to allow mothers to breastfeed. And 3 agreed to display their 3FCI certificate. So what that says to folks is when you walk in here and if you see a mother nursing, leave her alone, right? She's welcome here. It also says to folks to people who are not in their childbearing age, or people who are in their childbearing age who are not pregnant, that breastfeeding is okay, right? So you're really setting you're happy with the sentiments around breastfeeding as well. So 3FCI also have the church and the daycare. The interns also have the church and the daycare to provide a comfortable space for their mothers who were attending church, or for those who were in breastfeeding. So there were definitely successes around this particular initiative, and it's something that we hope to build out over time. But working with residents, 3FCI is shifting the environment and transforming the landscape for mothers throughout the communities that they serve. One huge bonus that came in Detroit was that the interns had decided that they wanted a public open breastfeeding space in one of the community centers that's frequented often. And so from that, and this is why it's important to listen to the folks, from that there was a mother's room created in one of the most frequented community centers in the Osborne community. So that was one of the results of the 3FCI initiative. Another important element of a breastfeeding-friendly Racine must include honorable policies, practices, and attitudes. My culminating project of my W.K. Kellogg Fellowship, Community Leadership Network Fellowship program is called Mommy Friendly Detroit. And so in partnership and leadership with my colleagues, Jay Clement and Valerie Jiggets, we sought to make motherhood for Black women an honorable experience. The premise of the project is that the baby is not well if the mother is not well. So we also believe that honoring Black motherhood is a direct disruption of racism. So let me say it louder for the folks in the back. It is a direct disruption of racism to celebrate and honor Black motherhood. There's no better way than to support our mothers who are birthing our babies and to show them honor. So here are some ideal policies to show honor, including flexible work schedule, paid maternity leave, earned paid sick time, breast milk and storage handling policies at child care centers, available and trained breastfeeding staff, Medicaid reimbursement for peers, doulas, and community health workers, as well as lactation specialists. What you say? Yes. If you honor motherhood, then have policies that show that you value motherhood, right? We're struggling, trust me, I know. I'm struggling writing grants, trying to get money to pay for things that should be provided for families, right? Because the government gets enough of our money. So we need Medicaid reimbursement. We can't do this work without looking at policies. We have to go beyond the mother said she wasn't gonna breastfeed. Don't tell me don't tell me she said she's not gonna breastfeed, right? If you're talking about, I'm not taking personal responsibility out, but your support with direct services around support and education. We have to do more. We have to really look at these things that are affecting whether a mother can breastfeed. If a mother needs a flexible work schedule so that she can get to her baby or that her baby can get to her, then that's important. One of our main issues in this country is not having paid maternity leave, right? If we honor motherhood, then we're not having people, and don't tell me you get 3 months off because of what's the federal policy that Clinton did? Because FMLA. A lot of Black mothers are not getting 3 months off, and I know it because they're going back to work 2 weeks after, right? There are barriers involved in that. So how can you expect me to have a successful breastfeeding experience when I have to go to work 2 weeks after I give birth to my baby? You're not honoring me. Like, you're not valuing me. The very fact that a mother has to leave her baby at 2 weeks old so that she can provide for them is an embarrassment to our system. It's tragic. And so what would be my point in starting to breastfeed my baby when I know I have to leave my baby in 2 weeks and we have 2 weeks and we haven't even, it takes that long to get, longer than that to get going with breastfeeding. If you breastfeed your baby, you know this. You know, so we need mothers who have paid maternity leave, right? What about earned sick time? So if my child is sick, we're talking about breastfeeding. If I'm sick and my child is sick, but I still have to go to work because I need to pay the bills, and that's another struggle. If I take my child to a child care center that does not support my breastfeeding, if I have to give my baby to somebody who does not support breastfeeding, that's a problem. We have early Head Start programs that are offering infant formula and making it easy for mothers to drop the babies off because they don't have to bring diapers, they don't have to bring milk, right? So where that's a benefit for those mothers who are feeding formula, it becomes a struggle for the mothers who are breastfeeding their babies and bringing breast milk. And the federal programs haven't given any guidelines for these early child care facilities on how to handle and store breast milk. But we have guidelines on the free infant formula that they're receiving. So we have to honor families. If you have a child care center, you need to know how to handle breast milk. You should not, and these are real, I got 11 years worth of stories. We should not be telling the mother that if you want to bring this breast milk, you need a doctor's note to bring the breast milk. These are real stories. A mother should not have her breast milk in your freezer at your child care center and come back the next day and you've thrown out her milk because you said something about a temperature of the freezer, which you really didn't even know the policy. You don't even know the temperature that the freezer should be at, but you thought it was too low, so you threw out the breast milk. So we have to be able to support our families, and we need policies that support our families and honor motherhood. That's my baby up there. That's my little Lala. She's 7 now, but she was 1 in that picture. So she's weaned. She's 7, she's weaned. I weaned her at 2 years old, but she still never leaves my side, so she was beside me as I was putting all the other pictures in the, in the presentation. She said, "Where's my picture?" So she was in that one community shot. I said, "It's right here." That wasn't good enough for her. So we found her picture. She's my twin. So what about practices? What about honorable practices? So here's an example of some honorable practices, right? Ongoing professional development. Let me see if I can get ongoing professional development with the emphasis on racial equity, cultural sensitivity, and cultural appropriate care. With an emphasis explicitly about this. Not just about all mothers. We're not all mothers. No, I have a very unique experience as a black woman. Not as a black person, not as a woman, but as a black woman that's very unique to me. That nobody else on this earth, or even in this, nobody else on this earth has that experience, right? So we're not talking about, I'm talking about black women here. And the name of my organization is Black Mothers Breastfeeding Association. So I hear this from dads. When dads are there, whether it's for a visit at the practitioner's office, whether it's someone coming to their home for a home visit, whether they're there while mother is giving birth, they're not acknowledged. If you can't, if I'm the woman here, and this is my man, and you ignore him, then how are you honoring me? Because I have his seed in me. So acknowledge fathers when they're present. It's critical because you need them. Like, you need their buy-in. That's how the mothers are supported. So, say hi, include them in the conversation. One important thing, too, is to have good bedside manners. When mother, particularly at different stages throughout prenatal care, birth, postpartum care, but particularly at birth, when a woman is in her most vulnerable stage she'll ever be in her life, likely, right? So, and this happened to me at the hospital. I was clear I was breastfeeding my first daughter. I got to get a better picture of her. She was in that group shot. She would be mad right now if she was here. But my oldest daughter, but when I was in the hospital, I had given birth to her. She kept wanting to nurse. She wanted to nurse. They nurse often, right? I don't know. This is my first child. They nurse often. So the nurse came in. She said, she's hungry again. She took the bottle. She's out the drawer. She said, "Here, give her this." She said, "Here, give her this." Instead of saying, "You know what? She's nursing normally, right? She's hungry again," because she's supposed to be hungry again. Her stomach's this little. Like, instead of saying her stomach's this small, she's hungry again. Let me help you to nurse her. She did the easy thing, give her this. And I'm, again, in my most vulnerable state. I just had a baby. No one was there with me at that particular moment. And I'm an advocate, like, I'm vocal, but I literally could not even respond to this woman because I couldn't, because they call it labor for a reason, right? I just given baby. So when she left the room, I put it back in the drawer and I closed it. That was the most resistance that I could do. That was my resistance. but that's my experience. Somebody else might have felt like their baby was hungry, right? I luckily had friends tell me about their horrible hospital experiences, and not all hospital experiences are horrible, but I was prepped to know that that could occur. Had I not been, who knows if my decision would have been differently. So honor, how goes bedside manners? Honor Black mothers. Acknowledge pain levels. There's been a lot of work going on nationally with the organization called Black Mamas Matter Alliance, and they're really looking at the maternal mortality rate of Black families and of black women. And so many times, and we know this from Serena Williams' story, so many times the families have reported that the mother kept saying she was in pain. She kept talking about how painful it was, and she was ignored. Like the practitioners did not acknowledge the level of pain that she said she had. Serena said she had to fight for herself, right? And so what happens then is, because the level of pain that, I don't know what Black people, they think Black women could just continue to endure pain. We've done enough suffering, right? We cannot continue to endure pain. Our pain levels are real. So when the woman tells you how much pain she's in, acknowledge that and proceed accordingly, because it can literally be the death of her. It can literally be the death of her. I got honor present fathers 2 times, so put a check mark by that. And honor her time. We got stuff to do. We don't want to be sitting up in your office for hours. Like, if I come and my doctor's appointment, what we're doing with our families is we're trying to work with them to figure out who is honoring Black mothers. And that's where we're suggesting that our families go for care. Because I don't have time to sit in your doctor's office in the waiting room for 2 or 3 hours. It's disrespectful. It's dishonorable. Honor my time. If I have a birthing plan, acknowledge it and honor it. You know, understanding that sometimes medical decisions sometimes you have to divert from your birthing plan, but don't act like it doesn't exist. You know, honor my birthing plan. These are things that you can do to honor motherhood. So part of when we were doing the Mommy Friendly Detroit and working on this, we were thinking about things, we wanted motherhood to be honorable, but we were thinking about things that would actually, like, okay, it's one thing to say honor Black motherhood, but it's another thing to talk about how you honor Black motherhood. And so that was kind of what we were working with. And so that's how we got to the policies, practices, and attitudes. And so offer extended hours. You know, is there one day that the office can open later in the day and maybe be open later at night to accommodate for those families so they don't have to take off work, right? Who struggle with getting there during those particular off hours. Have breastfeeding support and encouragement for every patient. These are some things that you can do in your practice. Now, what about attitudes, right? Check those attitudes. As we were like building our concept and our plan for Mommy Friendly Detroit, of course we talked to the mothers. You know what, our mothers, I can say this with a certainty, and you can check with anybody. If I call on our mothers, they show up. They show up. I don't have to do a whole lot of incentives. I don't have to do a whole lot of stuff to get people there. They show up. That's because we have a bi-directional relationship. They're valued. They're honored. And if I got stuff, I give it to them. But we don't have to, because they understand that if they tell us something, then it means something to us, and we're going to try to do something about it. And they understand that we care for them and their families and their babies, and that we're working to do something about it. People respond to you when they trust you. People respond to you when you've shown them by your actions that you care about them. So one of the mothers who we interviewed, who was really alone. She was actually on the leadership team representing families as we were building out the Mommy Friendly Detroit. One of the things she said to us stood out a lot, and in that conversation, what she said when she shared her authentic sentiments, she said, "Acknowledge my life when it comes to my life." Acknowledge my life when it comes to my life. So what does that mean? It says to me that I am somebody. So treat me like somebody. Treat me that way through your policies, your practices, and your attitudes. So we came up with several tangible items that show honor, and I have one here for you. It's a very simple way for providers to show that they value their patients. We created this card that really makes it easy for practices to show honor. And it's just as easy as completing an appointment card, right? When you go to the desk and they like, when's your next appointment? They write it down. So it says, on behalf of our practice, we thank you. We are committed to a mommy-friendly Detroit. And in the spirit of a mommy-friendly Detroit, we want to know, we appreciate, and then there are things for them to check. The questions you ask. So what does that do? Not only does it say, you put a check there, not only does it say we appreciate your questions, but it lets them know it's okay to ask questions. The stories you shared. Not only does it say we appreciate the stories that you shared, but it lets them know we want to get to know you a little bit better as our client, as our patient, as our peer, whatever your role may be. How you thank us, because we also have some cards where the families can give this to their practitioner, because we do know that it's a bi-directional relationship, right? So, or sometimes, and I see this in OBGYN offices when I go. One thank you that families usually always do is, as soon as they get a picture of their baby and they go back for that appointment, they give it to the doctor that helped to deliver their baby. That's a thank you, right? If I give you a picture of my baby, that means something to me. Like, what means more to me than my child, right? Your timeliness, right? Because sometimes the clients and patients, they're not on time, but if they show up on time, you want to check that because you want to make sure that they're coming back. Let them know that's something that you value. And your honesty. And then there's a place for other. And then there's a signature line. There's nothing hard here. Like, this is not difficult. It's just as quick as filling out an appointment card. Actually, when I was writing this up, I was like, wow, we should make these into appointment cards. So that's the next iteration of this. It'll be an appointment card. And so raise your hand if you received a greeting card from a business that you patronize over the holiday. Did you receive a greeting card in the mail? Mm-hmm. Several. Right? So how about we show gratitude all year long to the families that we service? Not just during the holidays because you want me to come and give you some more of my money, but just show gratitude throughout the year. We're not done. So, how do you check yourself? How are you accountable to the families that you service? The mothers whose voices you are amplifying. How are you reporting back to stakeholders? Because it's a bi-directional relationship, right? Bilateral. It's not just one way, right? So this is honor. This is what we call honor. When you ask families to inform your decision making through those surveys and focus groups, and you got them there, and you getting all this information, getting into black folks' head like that, you asked us to be here. We're here. We're helping you to inform your decision making, or at least, check a box on the grant, say you did talk to the people, right? Whatever it looks like, you got to be real. You got to be real with yourselves. So how are you reporting back? Again, You have to have a trusting relationship. Don't use and abuse your families. Value them, hold yourselves accountable, and you can really tell who trusts and values your service by the way they treat you and respond to you. So listed here are a few ways to be accountable. If you get funds for a program or a grant and you write all this great stuff up you're going to do, and we realize, and funders also realize that things change and sometimes you can't complete the project as you had planned, right? Most times it just doesn't happen that way anyway, because you should be learning and challenging assumptions and sometimes oscillating, but you got to have some level of fidelity to what you say you're going to do. What about measurable outcomes? Documented changes in knowledge, behavior, and attitudes. And how do you document those changes? It could be self-reporting from families. It could be through observations, through surveys, pre and post tests, storytellings, narratives, anecdotes. These are definitely ways that you can document changes in knowledge, behavior, and attitudes. What are your checks and balances? So you want to be able to report the challenges and successes to stakeholders. I can't believe that you had a project that you didn't run into any bumps, you didn't get any bruises, right? So what are those challenges? How did you handle them? Did you resolve them? Maybe you didn't, right? Hey, we couldn't figure this out. It's okay. Because if we all had the answers for increasing, you guys had the data in your folder. If we had the answers individually for decreasing infant mortality for Black babies, for increasing Black breastfeeding, if we could do that individually, then it would be done. So you got to be honest about the challenges, because you have to really inform your decision making and your programs as you move forward. And what is your continuous feedback loop? Right? I'm talking about with the families and the community that you service. There has to be a loop of feedback. You get information, you give information. They give information, you get information. Vice versa. There has to be some way that you're accountable to those families and to those folks. So we're going to just review for a minute. You can snap your picture or get your pen out, but we're going to talk about this later. So these are the big headers for the elements of a breastfeeding friendly system. There are 4: community voice, leadership, and civic engagement. The second is honorable policies, practices, and there are 3. Honorable practices, policies, and attitudes. And the third is accountability. So we're building a breastfeeding-friendly Racine. What does this look like for us? And I can open it up for questions, but I want you to think about this. I want you to be able to list at least 1 or 2 things, because we're all doing something good. We're all doing something right, but you may not know what the other person is doing or what the other agency is doing, so we want to be able to uplift those things and share the good news. So list 1 or 2 things. We're going to do it later, but you can write down the question now if you want. I'll still put it up later. But you want to be able to list 1 or 2 things from each of those 3 categories that you're currently doing in your capacity, within your capacity. What questions do you have?
How long did it take you in the process of getting the proclamation from the mayor?
It actually wasn't that long, because we had the relationship. We had already been building a relationship with the city council. So my colleagues and I, and then that particular city councilman is really involved in his district. So one of my colleagues said, hey, how can you support Black Breastfeeding Week? What can you all do? And that was one of the things that he suggested. But what I will tell you is that I'm in talks right now with the director of the Maternal Child Health Bureau at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services about getting the state to write a proclamation for Black Breastfeeding Week. Because imagine if our health department says we're celebrating Black Breastfeeding Week, what that means for the local health departments, the county health departments, and so forth. And I'll be honest, it was a phone call. And she said, oh, I think that's simple. We do have a new governor. She's like, I can't imagine that our new governor would say no to this. It's just, she said she just has to, you know, kind of go through whatever the ranks is, but it was as simple as a phone call. I'm not saying that it'll be that easy in Wisconsin. I don't know your atmosphere or your climate. However, usually you kind of just have to tell them about these things.
You had brought up on one of the slides about the opportunity to have doulas paid or some type of stipend or internship. What do you have in Michigan? Because in Wisconsin, you may be able to get a young person who wants to be a doula covered maybe is reimbursable for them to get that internship. Okay. But after that, you have to sustain that, and that's where it's difficult to get. So, what other funding is available to be able to get some of the children to be doulas, or even a lactation counselor, for them to get through training? A lot of times they may not have the skills to be able to go to these classes to get that certification. So we're trying to work with other programs so they can be able to pass that academic test.
Okay. So I want to be clear that we don't have an honorable policy in Michigan for providing those gaps. And I say that because it's not included in our policies, right? Medicaid's not reimbursing for it. So it comes on the back of community organizations like mine to write grants and fund it, right? So now I can tell you what we're doing because we use the Health Connect One community-based doula model, and we recently received national accreditation for that. So part of what we're doing is we're trying to leverage that accreditation to say, hey, you have these other home visiting programs that you're funding and you're giving reimbursement for because they meet these national standards. So in Michigan, so the home visiting programs that with the exception of one, and that's the one that I'm going to use as my example, with the exception of one, the home visiting programs meet this national standard. And so that's what qualifies them to be reimbursed. So now, because we have national accreditation, we also meet that national standard. So I'm in a process of planning and working through how we're going to move forward. But the other thing that we're doing is looking at it as a workforce development opportunity. So there's some opportunity with the Department of Labor as it relates to this because of the national accreditation. So the accreditation has opened up a few opportunities, but it's still something that we're working on. So right now, our program has been, our community-based doula program has been running since 2013 or 2014, but it's been grant fund. It's been through grant funds. There are larger organizations, though, who the cost of a community-based doula would be nothing for them, and they should make it a line item until we figure out the policies. Like it could be a line item, right? I'm a small organization. We don't have that, so we have to definitely go through foundations at this point, but we're working on sustaining it. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Hi. How are you? I'm happy to see you.
One of the things is a concern. I heard them when you were talking about Racine having this high disproportionate, but what I want people to know, it's not just Racine, that it is truly Wisconsin, that is the lowest state in regards to that. They did a video or whatever, and it showed Wisconsin, and it also showed that Wisconsin had the highest quality hospitals in the country.
Explain that to me.
See, that's the problem right there.
I'm confused.
How do you have the best hospital but you have the highest number of African American babies that have health issues. That is what. Now, y'all check it.
What's your hypothesis on the why? Because I know you got it. But you don't have to, you tell me.
But I think my concern is that it is not just the families. It's the policies that they use to take care of the family. I'm a big mouth, so I'm going to let you know that. But the thing that bothers me the most is that once you walk into the hospital, you become an entirely different person. They purposely change who you are. You put on a robe that's not your gown or whatever you wear. They told you what time to eat. They wake you up in your sleep. They tell you what pills to take. They take away you, and they use you in a different form. They would say patient in room so-and-so and so-and-so. So they sort of change who you are, but they don't take in consideration who you are as a human being. Now, when you mentioned that comment about when you were in the hospital and how people walked in that door and said to you, here's a baby bottle. As a person in the hospital, you assume the people around you who walk through that door know what they're talking about. You believe that they are there to take care of you. But the truth of the matter, how do we get so many African American babies not making it? How do we get so many African American women not being healthy? It has a lot to do with the institutions and how they see us. When you say check your attitude, that needs to be everyone who walks through that door when they come into that mother's room. Because what you say to that woman can set them in a bad position of finishing or breastfeeding. The one I remember is I'm a lactation consultant. I'm sitting there with my daughter-in-law, helping her breastfeed and give her information. And somebody walked in the room and said, oh, you know what? You don't have to worry about feeding that baby because the milk won't come in for 5 days. Okay? This is a black woman sitting there trying to figure out what's going on, what should I do? And this person walks in the room and says that. Now, I'm sitting there and I'm trying to keep from yelling because I'm upset. This is a black woman sitting here who's trying to breastfeed, and you just gave her information that is not true, and this woman will pay for that later on. This child will pay for it. So don't open your mouth when you walk in that door if you don't know what you're talking about, okay? The concern is that's what we have to deal with. We have to help women when they walk through the door in the hospital to know what they need to know. They used to give depot shots within the second day after the baby was delivered. Now, I remember that. And I wondered why that happened. And what the comment was, the doctors would say, are you interested in birth control? And they would say, yes. They would give them the shot before they left. Now, the part bothered me, the women were breastfeeding while they talking to them. She's sitting there breastfeeding, and then you're going to give her the depot shot. So now they changed their mind. They won't give you the depot shot right away. But that's because community people complained about that, saying that this woman was trying to breastfeed, and you gave her the depot shot before she walked out the door. So when you think about what you're giving the mother as she sits there, who's talking to her, I asked one hospital and I said to them, don't let anybody come in that room to give any kind of breastfeeding information if they don't know what it is. They keep their mouth closed because you have been stripped. You're no longer you. And you follow their information because you're in their position, in there. Don't give them something that can damage you.
Thank you. Yeah, that goes with what we're talking about honorable policies and practices. I know you want to say something, but I want to say something that when you were talking and you were talking about people coming into the room or in your space, sometimes even in your home, like home visitors, the first thing you should do if you honor somebody is introduce yourself. And I promise they must never taught that at any nursing school, I don't know what the ethics or etiquette class is, because I have probably only been to one, and I don't know if it's a black experience or my experience, but my experience is my black woman experience. I have only been to one office where the person who walked in the room introduced themselves to me. And so now I make it a point to ask people, who are you and what's your name? Because I'm making a point that before you do something to me or ask me something, I need to know who you are. Like, what gives you authority over me to come in here and start asking me questions, but you haven't even told me your name? Y'all nursing students, listen to this. Please introduce yourself. I am Kiddada Green. I am here on behalf of Black Mothers Breastfeeding Summit. I am your registered nurse from this time to this time. I am walking into your home as your home visiting social worker, right? I am Kiddada Green. I'm your social worker for the next month. It's a very simple, proper etiquette, but do not dishonor me and start practicing on me or ask me questions about me and without telling me who you are. And that happens especially in hospitals because there's so many people in and out. You know who it is. You want to say something? Okay. Okay. One more question? Okay, one more question. Yes, sir.
We're averaging probably 10 to 1 or 10 to 2 ratio with women that are coming in that's actually breastfeeding versus women that are not breastfeeding. In the conversations that I've had before in the past, there was a lot of lack of knowledge. And the question that I have that I've been engaged in regards to breastfeeding that I'm not authority. How does a woman know how much food the child is getting? We had situations where a mom has come in, we've dedicated a room, we've written policies that we allow breastfeeding in our facility, we've created an atmosphere for breastfeeding. But the problem that we've experienced that we recognize in other mothers that have come in is a lack of knowledge as to how much milk the child has received while he is latched, or is he latching properly, or he or she has been latching properly. So that's a big question that I'm finding that's coming out to the masses of mothers that are coming in, is the children are not getting enough food. They're not getting enough milk. Now this mother has come into our facility, she's breastfed, she's gone. Now in 45 minutes or an hour, we need to feed this child. So we do have policies, we do have the ability to store the milk. My daughter has already orchestrated and facilitated that measure. But the question and the problem that still exists during a mother's breastfeeding is how much or how long should a child latch on, and how does a mother know how much milk that child is?
Okay, can I provide lactation provider that comes? Okay.
Can I take his question and then my lactation consultants, y'all can jump in after me. They're itching. So the first thing I'm gonna tell you, brother, is we too caught up in scientific ounces. How many? The baby tells the mother that the baby's full, right? So if I'm nursing my baby, I know my baby is full by several things. My baby opens his or her hand and relaxes, right? That's a cue, because so mothers know this. Mothers know when their babies are satisfied. My baby removes herself from the breast. That tells you your baby is satisfied. See, babies understand when they're full just like we understand when they're full. And because my intuitive relationship with my baby tells me my baby is full, I know my baby is full. The struggle that we have, and why you're saying your mothers are unsure, is because we're caught up. One of the mother's greatest fears and concerns is my baby full, right? Because that's one of the things we have. We got to make sure our babies are clean and full and well taken care of. That's what we do when they're young. But what has happened is the idea of seeing how much milk is in the bottle has began to have mothers question their own intuition, their own intuitive experience with their babies, and so they struggle with that. And so it's perceived that the number one thing we get from our mothers oftentimes is, if my baby getting enough, and how do I know? And so we try to help her through that. But it's just been, you can measure the bottle for so long that it's kind of a hard barrier to get across. And the other thing that I would say keep in mind is that the babies, sometimes breastfed babies do eat every 45 minutes. They just do, because their stomachs are small. If you remember when I told you earlier in the presentation, the milk is digested very easily. So it doesn't sit on the stomach as long as infant formula. So they have to eat more often, especially if they're not at the age where they're getting any supplemental foods. So those are things that are important to know as you're working with mothers and families. So the babies will have to be fed. Fed more. The other thing is that you should know is that sometimes a breastfed baby is just not going to eat if mother is not there. And child care centers struggle with that. And I can imagine that it's hard, like if you're keeping a baby and a baby just won't take a bottle. But if when the mother comes and the mother nurses the baby, the baby's just gonna nurse more when they're with mom, because some kids refuse the bottle. And it's very hard. I can only imagine how hard it is for a child care provider. You're trying to feed a baby, the baby won't eat, the baby won't take it. And so it's challenging. But there's ways to work with that. And you had asked if he has a specialist at his center, because that could be something to support, so you're not out there on your own. But what I will tell you is to go to the University of North Carolina. They have on their website a breastfeeding-friendly child care, 10 steps to a breastfeeding-friendly child care center. Everything is downloadable in there for you. So that's the first free step that you can take to get more information about supporting breastfeeding mothers. Thank you. Appreciate you all.